Hey there, Danielle Matthews here. I am coming to you live from Florida, and today is Monday, so it is book club day. For those of you that are new to my content and new to myself, I help entrepreneurs and driven professionals basically master their inner world so that they can be the most fulfilled version of themselves, acting on purpose, with confidence, exuding it, and really tapping that peak performance. So one of the things that I love is going into books, the works of, I think, spiritual teachers, masters that have learned this dynamic of the inner world and have learned how to overcome it. And they give their tips, their tricks. So for book clubbers, as you're joining, let me know that you're here. Oops, what did I just step on? Almost unplugged everything. No, let me know that you're here. And hey, Angela. And then we can dive in. So for those of you that are maybe joining us for the first time, The Power of Now is by Eckhart Tolle. This book has had, it says 5 million copies sold. It's a bestseller, legitimate bestseller from just people of interest buying it that want to do it. Hey, Charlotte. And this has just kind of naturally grown. What he shares in here is really interesting. You can jump into this conversation at any point because what he's sharing is just kind of a conversation. He's basically answering questions that he's commonly asked and helping review. Hey, Tina. Thanks for letting me know you guys are here when you get here. So if you joined late and you're not up with me where I am, make sure you fast forward on the live. But this chapter is chapter 4 in the book. It's called Mind Strategies for Avoiding the Now. And when I read that, I said, oh, he is going to teach us the tricks of the ego mind. And it is our ego mind that really is the problem. So he talks about that in here, but I'm going to just jump in because these conversations always end up more than a half hour. So I don't want to waste any more time before we dive into things. So he talks about in the beginning here, the loss of the now is really the core delusion that turns, as he says, a mere situation, event, or emotion into a personal problem and into suffering. The loss of now is the loss of being. And I read that as the ego is the problem. The moment the ego gets involved in an event, in an emotion, in a situation, is the moment that we've started identifying with what's in here rather than being present with what is. Hey, Stephanie, I'm glad you've been able to join the live chat now too. That's wonderful. Glad to have you. So he says to be free of time is to be free of psychological need of past for your identity and future for your fulfillment. That sentence, I probably read it like 5 times because I thought, you know what? He just hit on so much just in that sentence. Did you guys see that when you were reading? You may have, you may not have, but I'm going to read it again. To be free of the psychological need of past for your identity. How much of you do you define by who you were before today? All the things you've done in your past. I think so many of us, right? We find identity in, who we are in the relationship with the people around us. So I'm a mother, I'm a daughter. I have this job, this profession, I performed this way in school, or I didn't perform that way in school, or, all of these things that have happened in the past, we allow to define us. And he says, this is part of the problem. And then the other part, he says, is this need to have the future fulfill us. So believing that something out there, once you get it, is going to be able to make all the things in here that are currently not okay. It is this belief that, when you have the job, when you have the money, when you have the relationship, when you have the kids, when you have the pet, when you have the insert material thing in the external world, you'll be happy. And what he's saying is to be free of time is to be free of this psychological need of the past for your identity and the future for your fulfillment. When you are done with that and you're in the now, that's why it's called the power of now. When you're in the now, when you're in the present moment, you're free of those things. And that's when you can actually experience the beauty of what life has to offer. So, This stuff is deep. Who was I talking to? Angela. I was talking to this week. I was like, yeah, the books are deep. And where we go with these conversations are deep, but it's like when you understand these principles and truths, like life becomes so much easier. It becomes so much easier. And also it helps you understand other people. If you go to page 60, he talks about the state that most people are in. Now, this is huge because once you understand that this is the dynamic within you, you start to see it in other people and you start to have compassion. So he says, being identified with your thought processes and emotions, your reactions, desires, and aversions, it is most people's normal state. It is a state of an almost continuous low level of unease, discontent, boredom, or nervousness, a kind of background static. Does this ring true? Put a 1 in the chat. Like when you read that, were you like, holy cow, how'd he know? Put a 1 in the chat if you're like, you know what, I see other people in this space. Or maybe, maybe it's yourself. You don't have to say if it's you or somebody else, but put a 1 in the chat if you're like, I'll read it again. If you see people that are basically in their reactions, desires, and aversions, they're in a continuous low-level state. Karen has, Lou has, continuous low-level state of unease, discontent, boredom, or nervousness. They have this background static. Yeah, I'm seeing it over on Instagram. I'm seeing it on Facebook. People are agreeing. And he says, you may not even realize this because it's so much a part of normal living. Just as you are aware, or just as you are not aware of a continuous low background noise like the hum of an air conditioner until it stops. When it suddenly does stop, there is a sense of relief. Most people don't know this is happening. And he even goes on to say, this is why, like, think about our world, especially here, like in the US, in the UK too, Angela. Like, there is so much entertainment. So much entertainment. There is so much for you to go out and do, whether it's drinking or food or television or a concert or shopping or, drugs, sex, alcohol, those things. Like, there's so many things to entertain us, a lot of people, and we think it's normal because this is what the masses are doing. But they're actually, what he says is, people seek those things to get rid of this background static. Because there's just this level of unease, this discontent, this boredom, this nervousness that's in their system. But when they do those things, he says it's an extremely short-lived symptom relief, but it does relieve the symptoms for a bit. And if you see yourself seeking those things, ask like, well, why am I? Why can't I just be okay with what's in here? Lou says they're filler. Yeah, exactly. It's this filler stuff. And it's avoiding us from, going in. But he goes on, and this sort of really surprised me. I had never considered this. He says that's ordinary unconsciousness. So what we just were talking about is like where the masses are. But he says this can turn into deep unconsciousness, a state of more acute and more obvious suffering or unhappiness. When things, quote unquote, go wrong, when the ego is threatened or there is a major challenge, threat, or loss, real or imagined in your life, or a conflict in your relationship, you move into a deep unconscious state. And you know what? When I read that, it hit me like square between the eyes of that's what COVID, the pandemic, like that is what happened collectively to all of humanity over the last 3 years, was this massive thing that went wrong. And where all of our egos were totally challenged because we couldn't control it, and the ego likes to control things. And he says, this is where you move into a deep unconscious state. And I thought, holy cow, this is what happened during COVID. And I think some people are there. And he said, it was so interesting. He said, the best indicator of your level of consciousness is how you deal with life challenges when they come. So reflect on how you dealt with the pandemic. He says through those challenges, an already unconscious person tends to become more deeply unconscious, going into those spaces, like we said, where it's very painful. He says, but a conscious person will become more intensely conscious. And you can use a challenge to awaken you. You can allow it to pull you into a deeper sleep, or you can allow it to wake you up even more. Isn't that amazing? And I thought, wow, like what a beautiful thing that humanity is like navigating. And like, I'm proud of all of us for having these conversations and, you know, doing this work of like talking about what it means to be awakened to all of this stuff. Yeah, super powerful insight. I agree. I don't know if it hit any of you, but as I read this, I just went, holy cow. And it didn't hit me the first time I read it. In fact, the first time I read these few pages, I didn't really underline too much. And then the second time I went through the book, I was like, wait a second. Like, this is what's happening now on Earth. And I don't know where it is. I'll get to it later, or I'll try to find it now. But he was saying, no, I want to find it now. On page 65, he says, are you polluting the world or are you cleaning up the mess? You are responsible for your inner space. High five me if you're like, for sure. Like, I am responsible for me. I am responsible for this inner world. Put a 5 in the chat if you're like, gotcha, Danielle. Yes, Eckhart. Like, yes. All right. So he says, thank you, Lynn, for the high 5. So he says, are you polluting the world or are you cleaning up the mess? You are responsible for your inner space. Nobody else is, just as you are responsible for the planet. This was a whole nother level of like, whoa. He says, as within, so without. The world in here will also be reflected out there. And he says, if humans clear their inner pollution, then they will also cease to create outer pollution. Wow. Like, wow. And I thought, putting the pandemic stuff over top of this, I thought, wow, what an opportunity we all have right now to use this as a wake-up call to our inner worlds and what's, you know, maybe not right, not flowing well, and start to clean up our inner worlds. And as more and more and more of us do this, because we are all connected, we are actually going to shift the external world. Because as he mentions, like, again, I don't remember exactly where it was in this chapter. There was so much. I like highlighted the whole chapters. So it's hard for me to find the spots that I want to go back to. But he was saying basically, like, you know, we're a detriment to the planet. If we don't figure our worlds out, like millions of unconscious people. Here he goes. The pollution of the planet is only an outward reflection of an inner psychic pollution. Millions of unconscious individuals not taking responsibility for their own inner space. Like, whoa. Whoa, 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 whoa. So I saw this as potential. Like, Candace says, yeah, powerful. Lou says, yeah, cease to pollute. I saw this as so powerful because I went, wow, like, it's like the powerful saying, be the change you want to see in the world. But literally, you have to be it internally. It's not saying go do something in the external world. It's saying be it internally. Be an example of this. Show this, and it will help other people kind of seek you out and go, how are you this way? Like, how are you so calm? How are you, you know, not anxious? This is huge. So how do we continue to increase our consciousness? He talks about, I think the key theme in this, to me, right? He talked about the title of the chapter was Mind Strategies for Avoiding the Now, which I read as, again, the tricks of the ego that are causing you to avoid the now. The number one thing he talks about was resistance. When you are resisting now, you are creating a ton of inner mind pollution. So ask yourself this question, and if you want to follow me, I'm on page 64. Do you resent doing what you're doing? Do you resent doing what you're doing? Maybe it's your job. Maybe it's something you agreed to do with your partner or your kids. Do you resist anything or resent anything, do you resent anything that you're doing? Are you carrying unspoken resentment toward a person close to you? Put a 1 in the chat. Because I think this is so common. So common. Do you resent someone in your world or something that happened to you in the past or a task that you have to do? I mean, I've certainly seen this in my life. I'd be putting 1s all over the chat. maybe some of you aren't aware that you are resenting. But this is, as he says, such a common thing. It really is. And when you realize you're resenting, feel what that feels like inside of you, right? Is it pleasant or unpleasant? Is it an energy that you would actually choose to have inside of you? Because he says you're actually making the choice. It does not matter if, like, you know, someone's taking advantage of you. Yeah, Fritz, Tina, Lynn. Okay, there's people out there that realize there's some resentment lingering. This is what's so interesting. He says, maybe you are being taken advantage of. Like, who would feel resentful if they were taken advantage of? Maybe that's a better question. Who would feel resentful if they were told to do an activity that was tedious and they didn't want to do? You know, who would be resentful if someone was dishonest with you? Like, come on. I know we're all trying to be at a higher level, but there's just the truth of this humanity in us, right? Like, there is a piece of us that's like, dang it, yes, you're super resentful about these things. What he says is, it could be true that someone was dishonest. It could be true that someone was taking advantage of you or has taken advantage of you, or true that you're doing some crazy, arduous, like, you know, tedious task at work. Okay, Stephanie's with me, Marie's with me. All right, all of these things could be true. But what he says is, the truth of it is irrelevant. And I think this is so, like, when you get this, guys, this is the meat of it. He says, whether your thoughts and emotions about this situation are justified makes no difference. Doesn't matter if you're right that someone shouldn't lie to you, or that you're right that you shouldn't be doing this tedious task, and that you know, are able to do something more. He says, the fact is, you're resisting what is. You are resisting what is, and you are making the present moment into an enemy. You are creating unhappiness, conflict between the inner and the outer. The moment you resist what is, the moment you're crying over the spilled milk, the moment you resist it is the moment now your inner world is in conflict with the external world that has already shown up. And what he's trying to help you see is that you've got the control of your inner world. Like, you're the one that is deciding to be resentful of it. Juliet, yes. My favorite part of all of this is, like, the next question is someone's like, well, like, how do I stop doing that? Like, how do I do it? And Juliet just put it in the chat. How do you drop negativity? You just drop it. Like, how do you drop a hot coal? You just drop it. How do you, what else does he say? How do you drop something heavy? You just drop it. Like, how do you get rid of something heavy? You just drop it. You literally just stop. Marie says, it is true, but I let them. That was an eye-opener, and I do the best to not let it. Sometimes it's hard when you always respond in a certain way. Yeah. But, like, it's your mind that's saying it's hard, because it's the mind, it's the ego that's got a lot to say about all these things. But the moment you just drop it, he says, number 65. I put a smiley face because I laughed. I literally laughed out loud. I laughed at the question because I knew what the answer was going to be, and then I laughed at his answer. How can we drop negativity as you suggest? By dropping it. Rule number 6, right, from Wayne Dyer. Don't take yourself so goddamn seriously. You just need to ditch it. Ditch it 100 times, Lou says. Ditch it every time. Recognize that you don't want to suffer the pain or carry the burden anymore, and then let go. Because you're the one making the burden. You're the one carrying the pain. You're the one having the thought. You get to control the inner world, not the outer world. All right, sometimes he says, and he kind of like gives a caveat. He says sometimes, like the loss of a loved one, there are some things that are so heavy that your psyche can't just drop it. All right? And he says those things need to be transmuted through acceptance, combined with the light of your presence. Sustained being in the now will allow those things eventually to start to release because they're deep. Stephanie says, I drop it by stepping into the knowing that everything is always happening for my highest and best good. I love that, Stephanie. Yeah, absolutely love it. Anything that occurs, just saying, well, this is for my highest and best good, and just accepting that this is for my highest and best good, and just knowing this is for my highest and best good. And so every single thing is a good thing. no matter if it's the thing you expected or the thing that you wanted, you're just in this space of knowing, well, everything is always for my highest and best, so whatever this is for my highest and best. I have one person in my world, she says, the crazier things get, when things really start to like go nuts, I get excited because that means there's some redirection happening that's so outside of my own scope and understanding of, you know, how I would want something to show up in the world or manifest. As things start to kind of go awry, I just kind of step back and go, wow, like something bigger than me is at play that's going to open doors for me I couldn't have even imagined. All right. Now he says, though, most patterns, many patterns in ordinary unconsciousness, on the other hand, can simply be dropped, right? Loss of a loved one, some of these things are deeper, but most things, you just drop it. Most things at work, most things with the people that are around you, just drop it. Just drop it. Yeah. Lou says, or Stephanie's saying for Lou that it can be hard. Yeah. Or Lou's saying to Stephanie. Anyway, whatever. Glad you two are chatting. This is so interesting. I think, you know, we complicate, like, how do we get through this stuff? It's like, there was some, I think it was a Saturday Night Live skit, and I can see it so vividly in my head, and it was like this parody of, you know, someone in like a psychologist's office and talking about her problems, and like the therapist goes, we'll just stop. Like, she's like, well, I'm thinking this, this, and this. And he goes, well, just stop. And, well, what about this and this? Just stop. Stop thinking about it. Stop doing that. Why are you going down that? Like, it just stop. Like, all that the psychologist is telling her is stop. Like, basically trying to stop the thinking. And it's funny, you know, because when you see it for what it is, like, she's so in her problem. She's like, why would I stop thinking about it? Like, what are you talking about? Like, she can't understand what's trying to be done. But when you see the bigger picture, and a lot of times we can see it on other people. Like, well, if you would just stop stressing about it, like, you wouldn't be stressed out. You know, like, let's just stop. And that's what he's saying, like, just drop it. Like, just literally drop it. Lou says, don't sweat the small stuff. Yeah, for sure, don't sweat the small stuff. What's interesting, though, like, this is what he calls acceptance. So it's like the moment that you stop resisting, you drop it, it means you've accepted what is. And when you're in a space of acceptance, now you're not emotionally drained or being pulled anywhere. You're grounded, and you can figure out, well, what next step can I make? Like, what do I have control over? Which direction can I move to navigate around what's here? And this was really interesting. I've practiced that for a long, long time. Acceptance. Just, okay, this is what it is. Okay, this is what it is. This next part got me. He says, when you have been practicing acceptance, we're on page 67. When you have been practicing acceptance for a while, as maybe you have, there comes a point when you need to go on to the next stage. I was like, what? There's another stage? He says, where those negative emotions are not created even anymore. If you don't, your acceptance just becomes a mental label that allows your ego to continue to indulge in unhappiness and so strengthen its sense of separation from other people, your surroundings, your here and now. As you know, separation is the basis for ego's sense of identity. I was like, whoa. He says, going beyond acceptance, all right? Well, I'm just going to read the whole paragraph. Bottom of page 67. If you really knew deeply that everything is okay, if you really knew what Stephanie said, right? If you really knew that, oh, there's someone driving around my house. Hopefully the dog doesn't see it. Otherwise, it's going to get very loud. But if you really knew everything was okay, and we know this is true, then you would have those negative feelings. Why would you have those negative feelings in the first place, right? What he's saying is that without judgment, without resistance to what is, no negative thoughts would ever arise. No resistance, no resentment would ever be there. He says you have an idea in your mind that everything is okay, but deep down, you don't really believe it. And so that old mental emotional pattern of resistance is still in place. And that's what makes you feel bad. He says, so you have to move beyond acceptance. You have to go to this space where, like, you just know that everything's okay. Where he says it's so powerful. Yeah, it's like what Stephanie said. It's just everything that unfolds in life. If you're just like, wow, this is going to be beautiful. Like, wow, I wonder what's opening. Like, wow, this is great. Wow, this is happening for me. Most of us have a hard time with that. So this is deeper for me. If you're with me, you're with me. Like, once I go beyond acceptance, I've been very good at just accepting what is. Like, okay, this is what it is. But I still sometimes have that initial reaction of like wanting it to be different. And what he's saying is like, eventually, when you know at your core, like when your being knows that it's all going to be fine, that there's nothing negative that can happen, that it's all flowing just as it's meant to, that you are part of the co-creating force that's out there in the world, then everything will always be okay. You don't even have to accept anymore because you're just in this space all the time where everything is fine. I would say my neighbor, Gurudev, he's in that space. Like, it's amazing to watch that just nothing rattles him. He's just like, okay, this is how it is. Okay, this is how it is. And that's where he shows up. Fritz, hey Fritz, he's saying, I'm finding it helpful to observe and question my reactions. It's quite eye-opening. Yeah. It's probably, I wrote in here, I buzzed past it, like something that will be good to journal for a week, is just observe the many ways in which unease, discontent, and tension arise within you. Through unnecessary judgments, resistance to what is, denial of the now, anything unconscious dissolves when you shine the light of consciousness on it. So how do you shine the light of consciousness? You do what Fritz is doing. I would encourage all of you to journal about this. Just like, what is the reaction I'm having, you know, that's causing some level of unease or discontent? Whenever those moments pop up in your life, write them down. So you can start to become aware of the thing that is not that it's an external thing, it's an internal thing that's popping up. Does that make sense? We talked about like those seeds that are in us, right? When those pop up. There's so much conversation in the chat. Let's see what else is going on. Charlotte says you just have to keep practicing. Stephanie's saying it's powerful. It's in releasing the attachment to what I thought it should be. Yeah. And accepting what is as perfection. We can't see the bigger picture. Yeah, exactly. It's a good thing to remember. Yeah, I know. Sometimes we believe, like, it's so funny. Like, we have such a limited way. Like, our mind, we believe it all should happen in this exact way. And really, like, we're limiting. You know, in our last book, The Power of Intention, it's like we saw and talked about how, like, the mind can only see this much. And why limit this infinite potential into what we believe it should look like? Just trust that it's all going to flow in a way that is, you know, for the highest and best good for everybody. And when you can trust, that's when it all starts to open. And he says, the last part, again, I smiled and like laughed out loud a couple times. I got another smiley face on this page. Basically, he says, you know, realizing that your own judgments is what's making you feel bad, it's good. And to start to realize, he says, are you defending your right to be unconscious, your right to suffer? Right? Because some people are like, well, it should or shouldn't be this way. Like, they're so in their own judgments. He says, don't worry. No one's going to take that away from you. Once you realize that a certain kind of food makes you sick, however, would you carry on eating that food and keep asserting that it is okay to be sick? I thought it was like the perfect analogy, because nobody would go eat at a restaurant that makes them sick and then the next day go, I'm going to eat there again. It felt really good to throw up. Really good. I love not feeling great. I'm going to go eat that food again. Like, nobody does that. But because it's so normal, because it's so conditioned, because the masses are doing it, because most people don't even realize. Like, he says in here, like, the Native Americans, you know, I thought that was amazing what he was saying about the Native Americans. Used to say, talking about the white people, he said, they're all seeking something. What are they seeking? The whites always want something. They're always uneasy. They're always restless. We don't know what they want. We think they are mad. Like, it's been happening forever. He says this happened, you know, before Jesus. This happened before Buddha. This has been like a problem, and it's a problem of the mind. Like, we're making ourselves sick. We're making ourselves mad because we don't realize that we're like plugged into something that's false. We're so attached to the ego. And like, you would not, as we were talking about, you would not go eat that bad food again and again. But for some reason, we wake up every day and we start letting this thing in our head talk. It should be this way. I want it to be that way. Why is this? Why do they treat me like that? They shouldn't have done this. Blah, 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 blah. Past stuff, future stuff. Like, and we just make ourselves sick. again and again and again. It's no wonder the Native Americans thought that we were mad. We were mental. And I don't know that we've evolved much since then, but we're figuring it out, right? I do have faith that we're all kind of, as a collective humanity, figuring this one out. And those of you involved here are. Angela says, unsure how to accept serious illness of a family member as what is. Oh, let's talk about this. So, trust that that soul is on that soul's journey. Sometimes, like my accident, for example, when it occurred, felt like it was the worst thing ever. Now, looking back, it was the best thing ever because it taught me so much. And so that soul is on its journey, and it's having a test day. An illness can be a serious test. And so what I would say, Angela, for you is, again, we think it should be this way. The universe knows better. It's opening up something for that person, and you can use it as an opportunity to reflect, well, what's that kicking up inside of me? Like, why am I uneasy with this? Why can't I accept it? It's hard, but it's sometimes like the really difficult moments are when the deepest lessons come. I hope that helps. All right, we hit 12:30, so more next week. Page 68 to the end of the chapter. So just finish out chapter 4, 68 to 76. Usually it's enough to cover 30 minutes, so I think that will be too. And we'll meet next week. Same time, same place. Instagram is back up. Facebook, it's always here. I do also load these up onto YouTube. So, you know, if people aren't on these platforms and you want to share, they're there as well on my YouTube channel. Guys, share this. Tag somebody that needs to hear this message. Like, you just heard it. Like, we can clean the pollution in our world by each one of us becoming more and more insightful. So we need to start sharing this. We need to get it out. Appreciate all of you, and I will see you next week. Lots of love.